Hey everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. I'm going to jump right in. 3 more questions. What is venture capitalism? I'm a little surprised that that was asked because there's no track record of any of the things I've done so far that would suggest I would know anything about that. That being said, I do know a little bit about it. Venture capitalism is sort of a business that's set up to fund startups. So let's say you've got a venture fund, in other words, a very large amount of money that a group of people have, so they start a venture capitalist business. They will find, or in many cases be approached by, entrepreneurs who have ideas but they don't have the proper funding to enact those ideas. And if this is deemed as a possible potential for growth, then the venture capitalists will invest in said business, watch it grow, and once it hits a certain level of growth, then they will sell their stock or get recouped on their investment, and in doing so, in the long game, make a profit. And it's definitely one of those kinds of industries where you would need a tremendous amount of startup money, because in many ways you're acting almost the way a bank does with business loans, except you're investing rather than loaning at an interest rate. And on top of that, it's going to take a while. So you're literally investing in multiple industries with a long-term payoff, but short-term massive amount of loss. In fact, if I remember right, there's actually a term for the early onset of a venture capitalist investment called something like the slope of the death slope, or the slope of no return. It sounds terrifying. It's definitely a risky kind of business. But for a young entrepreneur, or for somebody who's just come up with an idea, it could definitely be a way to receive funding for that idea. Anyway. That's about all I really know about it, but that's the idea. They don't actually make a product. They simply invest in people who have the potential to make a product. That's how it functions. Short question, short answer. Not exactly my expertise as far as that goes. That's what I know about it. How do radio waves travel in space if there's no matter? You mean matter in space? Well, first of all, there is matter in space, just a very small amount. That being said, I totally get what you're saying, because, like, for example, sound waves, they don't travel in space, and the reason they don't travel in space is because there's not enough matter to move. I mean, sound is the movement of air molecules, and there's not enough of anything in the quote-unquote vacuum of space to provide that. And so it would be easy to make the assumption that it's going to be the same with radio waves, since aren't radio waves just sound waves that are picked up by antennas? And short answer to that is no, they're not. They're completely different. When we think of waves, we think of something moving something else. But here's the thing about radio waves. If you take an electric field and you add to that a magnetic field, you end up with electromagnetic waves. And that's what radio waves are. They're electromagnetic waves. The interesting thing about that is they move at the speed of light, and they move both as a particle and a wave, so they're observed as both, and they can move through a vacuum, so they don't have to shift matter in order to move, in order to have their presence observed. Well, that sounds like light, doesn't it? I mean, all those things are applicable to light. Well, electromagnetic waves behave like light. They actually travel at the speed of light, and so it's generally accepted that they are a form of light. So radio waves are not like sound waves in the slightest, and so that's how they're able to move through the vacuum of space. I've heard a few conspiracy theorists bring that up, that well, space isn't real because how could radio waves move through it anyway? So that whole Voyager thing. Well, no, they're not. It's easy to misconstrue radio waves as sound waves or as something similar, but they're not. On a mechanical level, they are indistinguishable really from light in that sense. Particle and a wave, so that's the deal. Where does Rh negative come from? Okay. This one's probably going to be the rantier video. I'll try and keep this short. Nobody knows with absolute certainty where Rh negative blood comes from, and there's also a lot of conspiracy theories about that. That, well, Rh people are from Atlantis, Rh people are from Neptune, Rh people are from the Anunnaki, and things like that. Truthfully, though, Rh negative blood, there's only one thing that I know about it that could remotely be viewed as a skeptic's, or more logically, I don't like that word actually anymore. It's got a dirty connotation. An objective, scientifically sound view of Rh negative blood would be that they weren't initially so rare. There's a tendency to think, well, they must be new, they must be a small part of the population. Well, there's a lot of disadvantages to Rh negative blood, and I think that's why it's so small. For one thing, if you're an Rh negative woman and you are impregnated by an Rh positive man, your baby will end up with, what is it called, hemolytic disorder, and it's one of the, until very recently, with blood donors from Rh negative, it's one of the leading causes of infant death. So it's not a good thing. Well, something else interesting has been observed about Rh negative blood groups, and this is where the rarity probably comes from, not the hemolytic disorder. People with Rh negative blood are more negatively affected by Toxoplasma gondii, which I think I spoke about in a previous video. I had like that weird theory that cat ladies are the result of Toxoplasma gondii. Well, people with Rh negative blood are much more negatively affected by Toxoplasma. So it stands to reason that the advent of the domestic cat is going to play a role in them being outcompeted by Rh positive blood groups. So that's something interesting to think about. Like, literally the presence, and it also makes more sense because if you look at Africa, only like 1 to 3%, somewhere in that ballpark. I think it's like 1% of people have Rh negative blood. Whereas if you look at Europe, it varies between like 15 to 30% depending on the country. I think Basques and Berbers, which I know Morocco's technically not Europe, but Basques and Berbers, it's like 30% for them. Like 1 out of every 3 one of them has Rh negative blood type. But for most places, it's even lower. It's usually 15 or under, and in Africa it's 1%. Well, Africa's absolutely riddled with big cats. India, it's very low. They're absolutely riddled with big cats, and that's where Toxoplasma gondii comes from. It's pretty much all of the Felidae family. That's where you're going to get it. Europe didn't really have a notable population of felines outside of a few little tiny wildcats, and they tended to avoid any kind of human settlement until not a crazy long time ago, a couple of millennia ago. So over that period of time, it's possible that all of a sudden Rh positive became very advantageous. Forget hemolytic disorder. Now Toxoplasma has created an incentive for the Rh positive people to survive and reproduce at the expense of the Rh negative people. So that's possibly the deal, is that maybe this mutation has been around a long time, and it was just something that was sort of stable. There was a lot of them, and then the presence of felines caused it to lower and lower. That's not confirmed. That's not my own personal pet theory or anything, but it does make the most sense out of all the stories I've heard. So I'm less inclined to think that Rh negatives are from Atlantis, and I'm more inclined to think that Rh negatives simply always been part of the human genome, well, as far back as the human genome, and all those mutations happened. But the reason why they're so rare is they've been outcompeted because they're more negatively affected by Toxoplasma. So that's it. That's the end of the story. That answered everybody's questions. Bye.